Natlan's introduction to Genshin Impact is very near, and who knows what fresh things it'll bring to the Genshin Impact meta. For all we know, it could buff some old characters who are really in need of the extra help, so today I thought it'd be fun to discuss all the characters who could potentially see buffs within the Nation of Pyro that'd really appreciate a little extra push. My name is Juice, and let's get into it. Dehya has been a character that literally everyone and their mother has been wanting to get a buff for eons now. You must be pretty new to the Genshin community if the phrase buff Dehya doesn't speak to you whatsoever. Thing is, when Dehya came out, we all thought that she was going to be the premier virgin unit, or that she'd have at least something to do with burning. It all lined up perfectly. Every other Dendro reaction was being thoroughly covered by another unit, and with Dehya being the upcoming Pyro 5-star of the region, it would have made sense for her to take up this mantle. Fun fact for you if you're a newer player watching this, we didn't know that Dehya was gonna be standard right up until she was actually about to come out. Insane! But yeah, as we all know, that didn't end up happening. Instead, she became a solid defensive pyro unit to help keep burning up and burn out Ganyu teams, otherwise she became better later on when Farina came out, being able to do some decent vaporized numbers with both the wonderful actress and her own C1 on her side. Dehya is definitely not as bad as she was on release, which is pretty neat, but I think I speak for everyone when I say that I think there's no harm in pushing that a little further with Natlan, don't you think? With Emilie being around now, burning actually has a chance at doing something in the future, and I think it'd be sick if Dehya managed to have some sort of solid synergy with a burning or Burgeon buffer in the future that made running Dehya on field more worth it. Burgeon's cores are also self-damaging, so maybe something that'd make her tanking abilities more relevant would be pretty cool. Some kind of high-risk, high-reward team in which you rely on Dehya keeping you alive before Burgeon kills you, with a large blast of self-sustain in between to sustain a continuous Abyss run. It'd be pretty neat. Though, note that I'm just spitballing random ideas here, let me know how you want to see Dehya get buffed by Natlan down below. Also, if Dehya could use a new artifact set, that'd be pretty neat, because our current one is doing her no favors, being a roughly 1-2% increase over the 2-piece set that she used before Vorukasha's Glow came out. Something that'd actually significantly up her damage output, that'd be very nice. What I do want to say is that while you may think it's unrealistic, which is fair, remember that Keqing was absolute garbage before Sumeru and Dendro came out. Then Dendro came along and suddenly she became a really decent standard character. I think everybody by this stage has let go of the idea of Dehya possibly being as strong as a limited character. Instead, I think that simply bringing Dehya up to post-Dendro Keqing level would make everyone happy. A decent character who, while they were pretty much never going to be best in slot, has their respective team in which they can have their time in the spotlight. Which is what all characters should have at the bare minimum in my opinion. I think Emilie is the most obvious character when it comes to who's going to get a Natlan buff. Her base kit is honestly very good, it's more just that burning makes Emilie good, not so much Emilie makes burning good. I fully believe that Kinicha Movu Ika will be throwing her a bone. Plus, Emilie is the first character to properly tap in on burning as an archetype, so I can see this being expanded upon in the future with perhaps a dedicated 4-star support for the reaction, much like what Chevreuse does for Overload, so that'd also buffer up some more. I'd say what Emilie truly needs right now is teammates. More effective teammates, man. Once we have more burning-based comps that we can slot her into, then we've got a pretty neat specialist on our hands. Until then, she's just a unit with plenty of potential waiting to be tapped in on. Much like Kazuha, who came out pre-Inazuma with not many synergies, Emilie seems like she's gonna follow a similar pattern, becoming far better in the coming patches. Arataki Itto, Beans Hater. So how could we buff this goofy protein-averse fellow? Quite literally, my man needs to eat some steak, those abs be looking like cardboard. I'd say Itto has quite a few problems that need resolving, so let's address them all first and then get into how those problems can actually be fixed. First off, my man is Geo, Bricked Element. I find it funny how Navia, the best Geo character right now, is mostly the best because she doesn't want to play Mono Geo. The route to take for improving a situation element-wise is pretty simple. Make Shilonen crazy good with him. Shilonen is the upcoming Geo 5-star of Natlan, and she's the perfect opportunity to raise up the reputation of Geo as a whole by maybe introducing some new aspects to the team, or by having very solid buffs that makes Itto's damage worthwhile. Itto played with Chiori isn't horrible, but it is more so just okay. If Shilonen buffs both attack percent and def percent, that'll satisfy both Itto and also Chiori, because the cutting edge of fashion is dual scaling for those who didn't know. His team is also simply way too specific, and what I mean by this is that he isn't using commonly popular teammates aside from maybe Zhongli. But for a team this specific, it really doesn't provide anything outstanding. That's the issue. Gimmick teams usually give you some sort of interesting experience out of them. Itto's teams are just raw, hard, crusty DPS, so that needs cranking up. Or even just introduce some new reason to play Geo characters. Right now, every time Itto pops back into the Abyss, the Golden Wolf Lord comes along. Okay, cool. That's one boss, and even then, I don't like how restrictive it is. If you don't bring Geo, then any other character type takes super long to break down its little things, except for maybe Bloom teams or other fast attackers, which can also do it in decent timing. I'd prefer something like the Jade Plume Chicken, because while that boss is super easy, I like that while attacking it with Electro or Pyro may be ideal, you can still beat it using other element types if you want to. A better example would be Icymon, who really favors Electro and Dendro being in the team, since then you can cut its nonsense invisible phase short. But you can still easily clear with other good teams if you wait out its invisibility phase. Icymon isn't perfect to me. I don't like how particularly long that invisibility phase is, but it's close to being what I want to outline here. Something similar but for Geo would be cool, since the Wolf Lord just feels shoehorned at this stage. Or even some more common enemies that feel good to kill with Mono Geo would be nice. To be honest, I still think Shilonen or another Geo character buffing him is the most important thing of all, because creating new enemies will still feel like quote-unquote selling the solution to some people, which would be fair, even if it does invent new best-in-slot use cases for the character. Just because C6 Chevrolet's DPS is amazing against Hydro Tulpa doesn't suddenly make her the best Pyro DPS after all, so I can see where my ramblings are flawed. This is because Itto's real issue from moment number one has been that, when he came out, his damage was pretty good, especially if you picked up a Red Horn for him. The problem came over time, as eventually we got to a stage where his damage was no longer impressive, as the power barrier kept rising higher and higher, yet Itto's damage never followed the rising demands of higher DPS output, so eventually he fell out fast as new DPSs replaced him quickly. Never giving Itto any damage-related buffs has always been Hoyo's biggest mistake with him, but at least they're trying to remedy this by introducing characters such as Chiori, which raised the power level of Itto Mono Geo teams on the whole, which worked to decent enough effect, but not enough to provide Itto a spot on the map once more. So, Shilonen, Natlan, it's up to you to save him. Seriously, save this man. His damage also appears to be lacking in protein. Speaking of Geos who seriously need a hand lended to them, Albedo. But Jews! Chiori exists now. How could they even buff Albedo without buffing Chiori at the same time? That'd just make Albedo even more obsolete. Firstly, I wouldn't say no to a Chiori buff. Her baseline C0R0 state is pretty sad compared to C1R1. Secondly, it's very simple. You see this little EM buffing passive here? This is something Albedo has which Chiori doesn't, and it's pretty strange to me why they even gave Albedo this in the first place, since Geo was designed with being innate in mind, but I suppose it did serve its purpose back when Hu Tao Double Geo was Hu Tao's best team. Oh my god, I feel like an ancient fossil now after saying that. If a Natlan character could appreciate his EM buff while also wanting his Geo application, neat, problem solved. Shilonen, I'm gonna call on you again. Let's say Shilonen provides buffs if two characters are non-Geo, Dendro or Anemo, kind of like Navi's free 40% attack. That'd mean the Albedo Shilonen double Geo core would unironically not even be a joke, because then you could salt some vaporizers in front and enjoy Albedo's EM. Plus, if Shilonen buffs both a def percent and attack percent, I'm just spitballing here, not saying that this is actually what's gonna happen, but that solves the C0 Albedo's problem of not having a split scaling burst while also having C2 Albedos enjoy an extra large power up. I think an Albedo buff in general could also be some way to decrease the interval time of his Geo damage ticks from his skill, but I doubt that they'd pack this into Shilonen as well. This is because, sadly, even when Albedo does a decent damage tick, it's a very small amount. Decreasing his intervals so that there can be plenty of smaller hits adding up would be more efficient, and assuming Shilonen nudges his numbers up a little bit, so perhaps those numbers wouldn't be so small anymore. A character in the team being able to increase burst damage would also be nice, since considering how frickin' cool the animation is, it feels very lackluster. Either way, the fact that Albedo was banished to the Chronicled Wish does kind of show how Hoyoverse probably doesn't care about Albedo anymore, now that they have Chiori to focus on, which is a shame because I really like this guy. But with that being said, he is absolutely one of the most buff-hungry characters in the game right now, and I'm sure that he'd appreciate a leg up in the Nation of Pyro. Eula! Vengeance will be hers, because holy guacamole, Hoyoverse has done her dirty. Even Mika, her supposed dedicated support, didn't really upgrade her by that much when he came out, since at C6 he was on par, if not a little better than a C6 Rosaria in Eula's best-in-slot team. Farina's introduction to the game did end up making Mika better than Rosaria in the end, since you can now comfortably use Farina with Eula while having Mika as both a physical buffer and a healer. Alas, all of that was still not enough to land Eula a place on the map, so how could Hoyoverse salvage her at this stage? Simple, make a super conduct-based character of sorts. Somebody like Chevrolet or Nilu, but for superconduct teams. Or even include Shadow so that Hydro characters, cough cough Arena, can still be included in the team. Overload used to suck poo-poo balls, man. Nobody in the history of ever played it unless they hated themselves. Chevrolet is literally the saving grace of the reaction. So before you all say, no, impossible, how could a superconduct support possibly do that much for a character? Oh ho ho, my friend, clearly you don't own an air fryer, and clearly you underestimate the value of a good niche support. Farazan is like over a 50% DPS increase to Xiao teams, Shivers saved the reaction, Gorwat C6 is on par with Bennett in Mono Geo Itto teams. Like, those specialist characters are good, man. And a superconduct specialist or a shadow specialist would also help Fremine, who's also struggling in his own niche. Genshin Impact always has something up its sleeve when it comes to the meta, and to be honest, chances are they've got something up their sleeve that I can't even begin to predict. I mean, shoot, Fontaine saw the revival of Diluc with Xian Yun's inception into the game, so for all we know, anything is possible in fair game here. Remember to join my Discord and follow my Twitter. Both of those links will be down below in the pinned comment and description. My Ko-Fi will also be in both of those places if you're interested in supporting me. Otherwise, feel free to check out my channel memberships, which have opened up recently as of posting. You can gain access to some cool emotes. More perks and tiers coming soon. I also stream on Twitch. Check me out at twitch.tv/JuiceChanYT if you want to catch me live sometimes, playing Genshin, Wuthering Waves, Honkai Star Rail, and much more other things. Hopefully this video was able to give you some fresh ideas as to who Natlan will buff and why. This has been Juice signing out, and I will literally eat a Carolina Reaper if they somehow make Xinyan good. And that's a promise.